So like many relationships, money can sometimes complicate things. And if you add the layer of culture and difference in income levels, it can get complicated between open homes volunteers and guests. So Ontario Works levels are very low, cruelly so, I'd say. So our friends are dealing with budgets that are very limited, and Ontario Works levels haven't been updated to adjust for inflation for years and years. So it's really easy to want to help our guests financially. But there are a lot of reasons to avoid doing that, or to at least have careful conversations about what that means, because there might be more going on behind the scenes or culturally than what you're aware of. So since we're always aiming for mutuality and reciprocity, helping guests financially can get in the way of that. What you want to do is put yourself in their shoes. Imagine if you were always the receiver and never the giver. What if you weren't able to reciprocate a gift to your friend? Might that make you feel small, or even feel some shame? So to deal with money well and these tricky situations around culture and income level, we just want to make sure the communication is always flowing well in the kinship circle. So if you encounter a problem, if you notice a gap, or notice that a guest is missing something that they might need, it's always best to talk to your kinship circle leader about it. We might have more experience, we might have more knowledge about the situation. We might even know about a program that can fill the gap without you having to give personal funds directly to a guest. There will not always be easy answers, but it's best to consider the challenges together. Let me tell you 2 stories to illustrate what I mean. So when I first started volunteering with Micah House, one of our partner organizations, I became friends with a couple from Colombia and their 2 kids. And we really hit it off. For their first Christmas, I crocheted each of them a warm winter hat. And I put a lot of love and care into those hats. But when I gave them to them, something unexpected happened. They seemed very uncomfortable. I couldn't tell why. And then at the end of our visit, they gave me a whole bag of apples. And then I was uncomfortable because I knew those apples had come from the food bank. So they had wanted to give me a gift that was equal in value to what I had given them. But they weren't really able to do that. And it just made the situation very uncomfortable. We ended up continuing as friends, and we're still friends now, but it made things awkward for a while. And what I learned that day is that nobody wants to feel like the object of charity. And giving gifts that are too large for somebody to reciprocate can sometimes make people feel small or ashamed. And if I had talked to my volunteer supervisor at the time, she might have pointed me in a more helpful direction. Perhaps my gift would have been smaller, or it would have been an experience, something that we did together, rather than something physical. Second story, so a couple years ago, we welcomed a female guest from Sudan. And because of cultural norms around women and household leadership, she wasn't used to managing her own money. So she had a real learning curve when she arrived here. She bought some things that were unnecessary, like household decorations, and she was really running out of money quickly. Her hosts noticed this, which was great, and they started giving her money occasionally to help her pay her bills, like her phone bill. But the problem was that the kinship circle leader didn't know about this for quite a while. And eventually, it kept the guest from learning about how to budget well. She was used to going to a male relative for money, culturally, and now she was just going to her host for money. So it made sense to her culturally, but it wasn't really helping her get used to life in Canada, and it was in fact creating a dependency. The good news is that they figured it out, the kinship circle leader was brought in, and we found other ways to meet the needs and to coach her in budgeting. The relationship continued, but it really required that communication and that connection with the kinship circle. So a couple guidelines and things to be aware of. Most importantly, you just want to stay in communication with your kinship circle leader. If you notice a gap, and most likely that's going to be the host that notices that, communicate with the kinship circle leader, and we might be able to find another way to fill the gap. maybe a program you haven't heard of at the library or through the government, or some other measure that will help us to not give money directly to the guest. You might be surprised to see a guest sending money overseas for family and friends. This is something that we're really not used to in our individualistic North American culture, at least speaking for myself. But in other cultures, which are more communal, the individual bears more responsibility for their family and even for their community. And so guests will often send money back home. This might also be caused by the fact that the economy where they're from might be weak, or the conflict in their country may have gone on for so long that there's not really a decent way to make a living. So you'll often see guests sending money back even though they pay extra charges on that money, and it can be pretty difficult for them. But we just have to be cognizant of the fact that they're dealing with different pressures and come from a different culture than you might be used to. And so be careful about discouraging this behavior, because family and friends might be expecting that money, might really need that money. They might be counting on it to buy groceries that week. And so the best we can do is offer with humility what we know culturally about Canada, and then just support them as a friend. Remember, we're not parents or supervisors, we're friends. And so people will make their own choices based on their culture and based on the pressures on them. So payday loans can be a real trap for our guests. Payday loan places often charge a large portion of people's checks in order to get them the money early. And this can be a real trap, and people can get stuck in cycles of debt. They might not be aware of that. So it is really important for us to warn guests about this potential danger. They might still choose to use places like Cash Money. That's fine. But they just need to make an informed decision about the way that that could impact future checks and the future money that they'll have access to. Credit cards can also be a sticky situation for some guests. Not all, but some people from majority Muslim countries might not be used to credit cards because of prohibitions against collecting interest in those countries. So it can be a learning curve for folks, and we have resources to help people learn about credit cards if they're not used to them. Another thing that might be a little bit different here for people from certain countries is buying groceries at the corner store. So in many countries, say Honduras or say Mali, people buy most of their groceries at a corner store or at a neighborhood market. It's inexpensive, it's easy to access. But if you translate that here, it doesn't work the same way. We know that convenience stores here charge extra for the convenience of being able to walk to the store. And so if a guest were to buy all of their groceries at a corner store, their food budget wouldn't go very far. So what we can do is notice if somebody's buying a lot of groceries at a corner store and suggest more affordable options. Remember, we don't need to manage guests' lives or budgets for them. We're friends. But we can humbly offer what we know from our own cultural experience, while recognizing that our friends may be under different pressures or may come from a different culture than we do. And so we just offer what we know with open hands and leave them to make their own choices.